Eagles don't cry over the opinions of turkeys. T.D. Jakes. Few creatures have captured the respect and reverence of human beings as much as the eagle. These large birds of prey that dominate the food chain skies over much of the world have garnered fascination from various human cultures who will look up to them literally. It might be surprising to know that eagles aren't actually a real group in the scientific sense of the word, but rather a sort of common vernacular term used to various large birds of prey that soar over the clouds. This leads to the non-scientific category of eagle, blurring the lines between that of a hawk and the falcon, and sometimes even scavengers like vultures and condors. Technically, true eagles belong to the Aquia genus, which I'm mispronouncing, which is relegated to the Old World and Afro-Eurasia, meaning that American bald eagles aren't actual eagles. Most biologists today prefer to organize the biosphere through a set of clades and common ancestry, rather than through visible features that us non-scientist plebs categorize them with. But no matter, for this video, we will be covering eagles. And not just those eagles of the old world, but also eagles from the perspective of any human culture that considered an eagle to be, well, an eagle. And given the blurriness of what constitutes an eagle, I'll also cover how other birds of prey have inspired human societies. Now, generally speaking, eagles tend to represent the largest of the birds of prey, with hawks making up medium-sized birds of prey. And lo and behold, the category of hawk isn't exactly too scientific either, and it's not set in stone. Nor is the terminology referring to these animals as Europeans oftentimes call what Americans call hawks, buzzards. And Americans oftentimes use the word buzzard to refer to vultures. Even the catch-all term birds of prey sometimes is used to refer to raptors, which can also refer to a dinosaur, an Air Force jet, or hey, a Ford pickup truck. A testament to how we like naming things after them. There are also sea eagles, which may not be eagles depending on what category of eagle you're talking about. And there are offsprays that are pretty much seahawks, but then again, what is a real hawk? Owls, on the other hand, are typically raptors since they're birds of prey that hunt. But their specialization in the nocturnal world and their flat faces mean that they're almost never considered eagles themselves. This entire ordeal shows us that the human tendency to categorize the natural world based off of solely our own observation tends to say less about the natural world itself and more about our tendency to make order out of chaos, particularly when it comes to the wilds. But that doesn't mean that order and categories don't make any sense. They do. Nearly all of these animals are birds that hunt prey, whether that prey resides high in the skies like falcons, or on the ground like hawks killing rabbits. Or for that matter, even sea eagles that fly above the surface to hunt fish. On top of that, nearly all of them soar. And given the high altitudes that they soar upon, nearly all of them have excellent senses of sight. They use that sight to look down upon the world. And there was one animal more than any other that was very interested in looking back, not in fear, but in awe. The ancient Egyptians saw their god Ra, as well as the god Horus, in the form of falcons. The Aztecs founded their capital where an eagle was apparently perched over a cactus with a snake it had killed. They saw a degree of reverence for these mighty birds, and this reverence was cross-cultural, at different points in time across vastly different geographies. Zeus, the head of the gods of Olympus, and the pantheon of the sky god chose the eagle to symbolize his mastery of the skies. Sky gods oftentimes find their place as the god of gods, leaders of the heavens, a celestial father figure or father figures, and a watcher above all those below him. And what better animal to signify that than the eagle, the apex predator of the skies? The imagery and power of a large, elegant beast soaring at heights that most humans could never attain, spanning the upper worlds of the heavenly overlords, instilled a sense of respect for them, and, for that matter, other birds of prey, at least for the most part. Whenever eagles have played a role throughout human history, it has almost always been in a positive light. In the Bible, the book of Exodus uses a metaphor in which God rescues his chosen people out of Egypt on the wings of an eagle, or eagles. Being spared from doom through the rescue of eagles would become a common trope in various narratives, ranging from the scribes of ancient Judea to Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. The Persians would also use birds of prey to signify their dualistic religion of Zoroastrianism, with a man perched on top of the back of an eagle. While Zoroastrianism was later taken over by Islam as a dominant religion in what is now Iran, the imagery has continued to be a non-Islamic symbol of the Iranian people groups, a symbol of their native-born culture before the influence of the Greeks, Arabs, Turks, and others. The Romans would use the eagle as a symbol of their own military power. The eagle was an emblem on top of a staff to rally up the soldiers in times of war. And when this emblem was lost, it was not merely a loss of an item, but rather a loss of a shared sense of pride among the legion. A member of their legion would be called the aquilifere, also known as the eagle bearer. The Latin word for eagle is also the name of the current scientific genus for eagle. Well, some eagles. As we pointed out, the definitions are shaky. Anyway, the Roman reverence for the eagle would spread to various other cultures throughout their empire. And due to them bringing civilization to much of Europe outside of Greece, their use of eagles as an emblem would lead to various other European states later on using the eagle on their coat of arms. For example, the Holy Roman Empire, not to be confused with the actual Roman Empire, had adopted the eagle, namely a double-headed eagle. This was located in Central Europe at the time, and this would lead to many other nation-states such as Germany and Poland using the eagles as their symbols. But most of these eagles are single-headed, no mutants here. The German eagle, for example, is black with a gold background, and the Polish eagle is white with a red background. The Russian Empire would also adopt the eagle as a symbol, as it saw itself as the successor of the Roman and later Eastern Roman Byzantine empires, and adopted a double-headed eagle on their coat of arms, but would eventually be replaced by and large with the bear. The flag of the European Muslim-majority nation of Albania also uses the double-sided eagle on its flag, signifying the throwing off of the Turkish yoke. And of course, there's the most famous eagle as a national symbol of all, which is, you guessed it, the American bald eagle, which is not actually bald, it just looks bald from a distance. The Native Americans, like Europeans, were not a monolith. They had various cultures across the continent. However, nonetheless, many of them had shown reverence for the eagles on their side of the Atlantic. Eagles had an exalted status, whether they were soaring above the deciduous forests of the northeast, the Great Plains, or the southwestern deserts, or for that matter, the temperate rainforests and mountains of the Pacific Northwest. The most famous example of eagles being used to symbolize power were the war bonnets of various Plains Indians, which by and large were only worn by the most respected of leaders and warriors as a headpiece. Today, they are the only people who are allowed to use eagle feathers due to certain laws surrounding environmental protections, as it's part of their heritage and they by and large use it for ceremonial purposes. Europeans, for better or for worse, would arrive with their own reverence for their old world eagles, and would be equally impressed by those in the New World, namely the bald eagle. The bald eagle was eventually picked up as the U.S. national animal. However, it did meet some resistance, namely the founding father Benjamin Franklin, who wanted the turkey to be the national animal. But as I stated before, eagles do not care about the cries of turkeys, or more accurately, they don't care about the opinions of people who like turkeys. Turkeys don't quite elicit the same sort of inspiration or emotion as eagles for that matter, although they do inspire a great deal of hunger. While depictions of eagles have largely been positive, the same is not true for other birds of prey, namely the vulture. Vultures are usually seen in a negative light by human cultures because, well, they're ugly, and they're scavengers that eat rotting carcasses. Vultures, despite their negative image, play an important role in cleaning up the ecosystem of decaying flesh, with stomachs so strong they could put Nikocado avocado to shame. Turns out the reason why they are bald is because the food they eat contains a lot of pathogens, since it's rotting, and feathers make it easier for those pathogens to survive, as it provides them with more surface area, hence why vultures are largely bald, so they don't get sick. Given that this is, well, disgusting, vultures alongside other scavengers like ravens, crows, and hyenas, by and large tend to be viewed negatively by various human cultures, as they live off of rotting flesh, which humans find disgusting. Nonetheless, the aforementioned Zoroastrians have practiced sky burials, in which human caskets are oftentimes handed over to vultures and other carrion birds to be eaten, and thereby united with the skies above. Some vulture-like creatures, like condors, do have some degree of reverence, primarily due to their size, given the fact that they are some of the largest flying birds in the world. Now, let's move on to another type of bird of prey that really is the main outlier, and those are the owls. Owls play a distinctive role in human cultures, sometimes being symbols of wisdom, despite not being particularly smarter than other birds of prey. But outside of that, they're oftentimes seen as ominous, bringers of misfortune in various parts of the world. From the native tribes of the Apache of New Mexico to parts of sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere. I suspect, since these owls hoot frequently at dusk as it's getting darker and cooler, they have become symbols of, well, danger. It's not a surprise, as we are a diurnal species, and therefore, before the advent of electricity, night was pretty scary. Despite this, owls themselves don't pose any significant threat to humans, and were probably helpful to early human farming societies due to them hunting rats and mice. Today, birds of prey have been subject to conservation efforts. The most notable example of this has been the American Endangered Species Act, which has been very successful and has delisted the bald eagle, the symbol of the United States, from the endangered species list, since it has rebounded its numbers significantly since the 1970s. However, there are other stories that have not been quite as successful, such as that of the Californian condor, which is critically endangered. It's not a surprise that we place so much effort on conservation for them. After all, our ancestors saw these birds of prey as almost untouchable, perhaps supernatural, because in many ways they were untouchable. They were flying so high, untouched and invulnerable to the barbarity of Earth's surface, as they stared down on us from a safe vantage point, ruling over the skies and ruling over various other birds. However, as humans expanded and dominated the Earth, of which these birds of prey looked down upon, the kings of the skies turned out to be not quite as powerful as we once thought. If anything, some of them, in fact, were quite vulnerable. After all, now we humans control the skies, that our ancestors once thought were out of reach. But nonetheless, we designed the builds of our planes, our vessels of the skies, after these great avian beasts. Our ancestors, both literally and figuratively, looked up to them, and now we can look at them upon any vantage point we wish.